have a special guest here today with us. We have Mr. Scott Silverman. I want to welcome you to the show, Mr. Silverman. He's the crisis counselor, behavior, and intensive substance abuse health specialist at Confidential Recovery based out of San Diego, California. He's also nominated as a CNN Hero of the Week at the City of San Diego, honored him by selecting February 19th as Scott Silverman Day for his contributions to the community over the last 15 years. Scott assisted more than 25,000 people and sat on numerous boards in San Diego, helping with job readiness, training, employment placement assistance, mental health counseling, case management, and affordable housing referrals to people who desire to change their lives. Also, author of the book Tell Me No, I Dare You, a guide for living a heroic life. Scott shares strategies for living an authentic and fulfilling life. Scott has extensive knowledge and experiences with relationships between substance abuse, unemployment, poverty, homelessness, and incarceration. He is a frequent speaker to political, business, and community groups on the need for prisoner reform to prevent homelessness, enhance public safety, and reduce costs of California taxpayers by helping former inmates to avoid reincarceration. I want to welcome you to Unplugged Health, and I want to say how honored I am to have you on Unplugged Health as my first guest. I'm very passionate about the holistic approach in the community. So as we focus on the not only the physical aspect, but also the mental aspect, I want to thank you for coming on our show and being a great contribution. Welcome to the show,
Well,
Mr.
thanks. Nice to be here. Listening to you go through all that stuff, I'm thinking, who's he talking about? This is when you get older, your resume gets longer. No, it's a real honor to be here, and I'm hoping to touch some lives and continue to do the work that I've always done. And it's an honor to be here with you. And I know what little I've learned about you, you're pretty passionate about the journey that you're on as well. So hopefully we'll touch some lives and maybe even save one, maybe two, maybe more.
Oh, nice, nice. So let's start off with the first question. Tell the Unplugged Health listeners about who Mr. Silverman is. Like, what's the core of you, and what made you choose the career path that you chose?
Yeah. Well, first call me Scott, and just so we have it right, Scott H. Silverman is how anybody can reach me on the web. And I like to put the H in because there's a fella in Japan who has the same name. And when he gets my stuff, he really gets upset with me. We've become friends over the years. So he goes, be sure and put the H in and whenever they talk about you and you talk about it, because I can't do much with your information. Our time zones are so different. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in San Diego. A family of four kids and traditional family, work ethic. My family had a small business. I worked in it every day. I was very active, didn't do too well in school. And I was one of those kids that kind of, had a short attention span. They now call it ADHD. I think I may have had it. And then I also had a 8-second attention span on top of that as well. So one of my first big hits about getting in trouble with, in school as a buddy of mine, we were in second grade. I remember this distinctly. He went on a family skiing trip. He came back from his trip and we kind of reconnoitered on the playground, got in the sandbox, and, he takes his shoe off and he had actually broken his leg while he was skiing. So fractured it and he was out of school for another week or two. And then when he came back, this cast just gotten off and he took a shoe and threw it at me, to say hello, what guys do. And then I picked it up, threw it back at him, and lo and behold, I hit the fracture on his leg and re-broke his leg. I don't know how that happened. So second grade, I was escorted to the principal's office and they called my family. I can remember hearing in the background, your son has broken one of his classmates' legs. And my parents were just in shock. How could that happen? Anyway, so it was decided at that time I'd had a couple other incidents. It was time to move to another school, smaller classes, a little more focus, and they had me tested, blah, blah, blah. So fast forwarding, I got in more trouble in school, and I was just one of those kids that they call them the black sheeps in the family, and I was my family's black sheep, and always on the radar, unfortunately, and just I called it a victim of circumstance. Anyway, over time, that just kind of progressed, and then I was sent away to boys' school in Arizona, and things really got bad that year. They got a lot worse than they had been, and from there, I just decided that I need to do something different. And, when I got home, I went and saw this psychologist, and they told me that, you're basically a loser. You should just really be good at it. And I thought, oh my God. I started drinking, experimenting in my teens, and then moved into marijuana. But marijuana back in those days, wasn't really too powerful. And then I found methamphetamine. That was a big drug of choice in San Diego. And then I started, distributing it. And I like to call myself those days, and I'm retired now, though, unlicensed pharmacist. So I had a distribution and got to know a lot of people and made a big name for myself in my senior year in high school. Although my behavior kind of started to improve, I thought, but my substance abuse really increased. And then it continues to escalate, and got into hallucinogens and met Mr. Cocaine, and things really started to happen for me in a way. Still working away, but partying very hard, and then got into drinking in a bigger way, and things progressed and things went on, and just again fast forwarding, I crashed and burned. And when I was 30, and I had attempted to take my own life. I was on a business trip in New York, and I didn't succeed with that, thank God. And divine intervention was there, and that was on a Friday morning. And that night I flew home, and then Saturday morning I was in rehab. So I'd met with my family that night, and I had been married just 2 years. So my wife and I were together those 2 years, the two worst years, and we're actually still together, which is nice. And just celebrated 38 years together, which is a kind of a miracle, right? Because generally when you go through that in a relationship, the relationship tends to end. And, I got into treatment, and, knock on wood, this past November, I celebrated 35 years of continuous sobriety. So 35 years sobriety, 38, years with my wife. And it's just been, working the miracles and doing what needs to be done. So I ended up leaving the family business, starting all over again. I was on disability for 2 years, trying to figure out what I needed to do, wanted to do, started a different business, and got involved with that, and got involved with service and volunteering. And, again, moving it fast forward, it's just, my life has just been different ever since I stopped drinking and using. And, what I do today is I run an outpatient program. I'm a crisis coach. And what that means is I help families navigate. I call myself a family navigator. I like that term. And so what I do is when a family calls me and says, I have a son, I have a daughter, I have a significant other, and they're just out of control, or we don't know what to do, and they can't really, get to an individual who specializes in that. Because, you can go to a therapist, you can go to a psychologist, you can go to a psychiatrist, you can go to your faith-based leader, you can go to your primary doctor. But people who have substance abuse issues, they kind of sit on the fence of a lot of different things. And what I do is I help them navigate and get to that expertise and the best and highest level of care. So that's kind of what I do today is I do everything I can to help others, get into treatment, access to treatment, and find ways to get help.
Okay, nice. You've
So
had a
that's kind of
long
it.
journey. Yes, you've had a long journey, and it's always a blessing to still have you here because you could have lost your life, but thank God you didn't, because now you've been a blessing to other lives, and you're still continuing to be a blessing to lives. I wanted to ask you, especially being a family navigator, during these times, especially with the coronavirus, what do you think we should be doing to alleviate, some of the wants to commit suicide or participate in illicit drug uses, like with this opioid crisis that's going on? I kind of think that the media has been portraying and talking all about the spread, but, let's talk about the isolation part. What do you think people should be doing to, navigate away from those deep negative thoughts?
Yeah. Well, mentioning the opioid crisis, that's been going on for a long time, and right now in this country, we lose almost 200 people every day to the opioid crisis, mostly prescription medication, fentanyl, heroin, and we're not going to do a drunk-a-log today or an addict's drunk-a-log or drug-a-log today, but those kind of things have been going on for years, and they've gotten worse. I mean, last year in this country, 72,000 people died behind substance abuse, mostly opioids. So, and that was more people last year than died in Vietnam, the entire war. So when you put that into a scale, so, and what's happened with this coronavirus, obviously, and that's just the last few weeks, month and a half, 2 months. Here we are in the almost middle of March, and this is what's going on now is just unprecedented, and we've never seen anything like this before. And we're watching people hunker down. I was just in quarantine at my home, and because we were exposed to somebody, it turns out the test was negative, but it took 6 days to get the results. So we're in a very complicated time. And one of the things that I've spent a lot of time with the last couple of weeks with families is my son, my daughter, they don't want to go to meetings, they don't want to get out socially. They don't want to be around other people. And I said, well, that's interesting. Here you have a substance abuser who basically woke up each morning and did whatever they could to, probably take their own life. But when they have to go to a meeting for an hour and be with others so they can have that support, they're finding ways to avoid it. And I've gotten a lot of different emails and seeing posts on the social media that people are actually leaving inpatient programs right now as an excuse. They're using I call it an excuse. It may be a rationale, but they go, I don't want to be around people who have this virus. And it's like, are you kidding me? 3 weeks ago before you got in here, you were driving around with a needle in your arm, the influence of poly drug issues. And now you're avoiding treatment. I understand that. So it's a mixed message. So I think, one of the things that I'm here in San Diego, I'm what's called an SME, a subject matter expert. So I go on television every couple of weeks. And because I was in quarantine, I missed my opportunity, but it's coming back at the end of the month to talk about what to do when you're at home right now. So if you are isolated or you're sitting at home or you're following the directions that the CDC and the government's telling you and your family's suggesting, to get online, call people. There's tons of different resources right now on the internet. You can actually go into chat rooms and talk about your own recovery. You can talk about your day, how you're feeling, what's going on. There's crisis hotlines everywhere. So don't avoid the things that you need to do